Everyone treats the symbiote removal as Peter's greatest act of willpower. The church bell scene, the alien suit burning off, Peter choosing himself over raw power. The fandom has canonized that moment as heroic. But here's what that reading completely ignores. Peter Parker with the symbiote was objectively better at saving people. Faster reflexes, greater strength, organic webbing that never ran out, enhanced threat detection that made his natural spider sense look like a rough draft. Every single metric that matters for being Spider-Man improved under the symbiote. So the question isn't whether Peter was strong enough to remove it. The question is whether removing it was actually the right call. And when you trace what the symbiote actually does to a host across the comics and what the MCU has been quietly building toward, the answer gets genuinely complicated. Let's start with what the symbiote actually is, beyond the surface-level alien parasite summary everyone already knows. In Amazing Spider-Man number 252 from 1984, Peter returns from the Secret Wars wearing what he thinks is a new suit. For months of publication time, and a significant stretch of in-universe time, he has no idea it's alive. The suit responds to his thoughts. It produces webbing without mechanical cartridges. It mimics his street clothes when he wants to be in civilian mode. It is, functionally, the perfect Spider-Man upgrade. The horror reveal, when it comes in Amazing Spider-Man number 258, is that the suit has been taking Peter out while he sleeps, using his body without his knowledge to go on unsanctioned nightly patrols, draining his energy to the point where Reed Richards identifies him as suffering from extreme exhaustion that should be physically impossible. Here's the implication that the fandom glosses over. The symbiote wasn't torturing Peter. It was going out and fighting crime while Peter slept. It was doing the job. It just wasn't asking permission. Now think about what Peter's life looks like without the symbiote at this point in his arc. He's perpetually broke. His mechanical web shooters malfunction at the worst possible moments. Spectacular Spider-Man number 100 from 1985 shows Peter mid-battle frantically reloading cartridges while taking hits he shouldn't be taking. Aunt May is ill. His grades are suffering. He is stretched so thin across every part of his life that the dual identity is actively destroying both halves of it. The symbiote eliminated every single logistical problem he had as Spider-Man. The cost was autonomy, and specifically the cost was those nightly excursions he didn't consent to. Remove that one element, the nocturnal hijacking, and the symbiote is, on paper, an unambiguous net positive for Peter Parker. So ask yourself, what if the nocturnal excursions weren't the symbiote going rogue? What if they were the symbiote trying to protect a host it had genuinely bonded with, processing threats while Peter's conscious mind rested, operating on an instinct that wasn't malicious but was simply alien? In Venom, Lethal Protector number 1 from 1993, the symbiote's behavior under Eddie Brock is explicitly described by the alien itself as motivated by what it understands as protection. It does not have a human moral framework. It has an instinct to keep its host alive and to extend that protection outward. That's not evil, it's alien, and Peter never gave it the chance to learn the difference. Here's where it gets wild. The MCU has been seeding symbiote lore quietly for years, and the implications for a version of Peter who never separated from the alien suit are significant. In Spider-Man: No Way Home, the multiverse breach pulls Eddie Brock into the MCU briefly, and crucially, when he's pulled back, a small amount of the Venom symbiote is left behind on a bar counter. That droplet did not appear in the film by accident. The Russo brothers' philosophy on the MCU, articulated in multiple interviews, including a 2019 conversation with the Happy Sad Confused podcast, was that nothing appears on screen in these films without intention. Whatever that symbiote residue is building toward, the groundwork exists in MCU canon right now. And reportedly, according to multiple insider sources including the trades reporting on Marvel's Phase 6 planning, the symbiote storyline is connected to the broader multiverse saga Endgame in ways that haven't been publicly confirmed. The specific details are unverified, but the structural logic tracks. If variants of Peter Parker exist across the multiverse, a variant who never removed the symbiote represents a completely different threat profile than anything the MCU's Avengers have faced from a Spider-Man adjacent character. Let's build what that version of Peter actually looks like 5 years into bonding with the symbiote, using what the comics tell us about long-term hosts. Eddie Brock and the symbiote were bonded continuously from Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988 through the early 2000s, well over a decade of shared existence. In that time, the symbiote adapted to Brock's physiology so completely that attempting separation caused both host and alien genuine physical trauma. By Venom number 1 from 2003, written by Daniel Way, The symbiote had developed what neurologists in-universe described as a codependent neural architecture with Brock, meaning the alien had physically rewired portions of the neural pathways it shared with its host to intertwine their nervous systems. Separation didn't just take willpower, it required medical intervention. Now apply that timeline to Peter. Peter is a genius-level biochemist and physicist. He would have understood what was happening to his neural architecture faster than Brock did. He might have found a way to negotiate with the symbiote rather than simply endure it. To set parameters, establish limits on the nocturnal excursions, create a functional partnership rather than a parasitic relationship. In Amazing Spider-Man number 654 from 2011, Flash Thompson does exactly this under a controlled military program. He uses the symbiote in carefully limited bursts, maintaining separation during off-mission periods, and the result is Agent Venom, arguably the most tactically effective symbiote host in Marvel Comics history. Peter has a higher intellect than Flash, a stronger moral framework, and a pre-existing bond with that specific symbiote. He had every advantage Flash had and more. But here's the part nobody talks about. The symbiote's long-term effect on a host is not purely additive. In Carnage number 1 from 2010, Dr. Tanis Neves, a prosthetics researcher who temporarily bonds with a symbiote offspring, notes that the alien amplifies existing psychological states. It doesn't create new ones. Cletus Cassidy was already a serial killer before the Carnage symbiote. Eddie Brock already had a rage-based obsession with Peter Parker. The symbiote metabolized those existing pathologies and made them louder. What it amplified in Peter, at least initially, was the overwhelming need to protect people. His guilt over Uncle Ben, his compulsive self-sacrifice. The symbiote was feeding on those instincts and growing stronger because of them, which is why the nocturnal patrols happened in the first place. The long-term implication is that a Peter who never separated from the symbiote would, over time, become increasingly incapable of not acting on those instincts. Every threat would feel urgent. Every civilian in danger would create an irresistible pull. He would lose the ability to choose to stand down. No shot he ever goes home for a normal night while someone somewhere in New York is in danger. That's not a supervillain origin. That's a different kind of tragedy. A hero who is permanently on, permanently burning, with no mechanism for rest and no ability to turn the instinct off. Now ask yourself what that version of Peter looks like during the events of Civil War. In the MCU's version of the conflict, Peter sides with Tony Stark and publicly unmasks at the Stark-organized press conference, a decision he later deeply regrets and that No Way Home treats as the inciting wound of his entire adult arc. A Peter bonded to the symbiote for years by that point is not the kid Tony recruited from Queens. He is faster, stronger, and operating on an enhanced threat perception framework that processes political and tactical scenarios the way his spider sense processes physical danger. He would have seen the Registration Act for what it was, a mechanism of institutional control dressed as accountability, long before Steve Rogers reached that conclusion. He might never have sided with Tony at all. And if Peter is on Cap's side of the Civil War with the full power of a long-term symbiote bond, the outcome of that conflict changes materially. The airport battle in Captain America. Civil War ends differently when Spider-Man isn't working as Stark's asset. The chain of events that leads to Tony dying in Endgame might not happen the same way. Change one variable that early and you are looking at a fundamentally different MCU. Here's the question that actually breaks the theory open, and it's one the comics have never fully resolved. If Peter had kept the symbiote, would MJ and Gwen be safer or more endangered? The symbiote's track record with the people its host loves is genuinely horrifying. In Venom number 5 from 2018, written by Donny Cates, the symbiote god Null, the King in Black, is established as a dark intelligence woven into every symbiote's genetic memory. Every symbiote on Earth has a dormant connection to Null. Eddie Brock didn't know that. Flash Thompson didn't know that. Peter wouldn't have known that either. Long-term bonding with the alien suit means long-term proximity to a dormant signal from a cosmic-level dark entity whose plan, fully revealed in the King in Black event from 2020 to 2021, involves consuming all light and life in the universe starting with Earth. Peter Parker, the most important street-level hero in Marvel, with a direct neural link to an antenna tuned to the King in Black. Think about that. The version of Peter who never removed the symbiote is not simply a stronger Spider-Man. He's a Spider-Man walking toward a confrontation with something that makes Thanos look like a mid-tier threat, with no idea the danger is already inside him. His greatest strength becomes the mechanism of his most catastrophic vulnerability, and the comics version of that story, the Cates Venom run, Absolute Carnage, King in Black. is one of the darkest and most ambitious things Marvel has published in the last decade. The MCU hasn't gone there yet, but that symbiote residue sitting in a bar in the sacred timeline says someone in those writers' rooms is thinking about exactly this. So here's what I want you to drop in the comments. If you were writing the MCU version of Peter keeping the symbiote, do you end it with him breaking free, or do you let him fall? Because the comics have done both, and the answer changes everything about what Spider-Man actually means as a character. Soon we're going deep on Null and what his arrival in the MCU could actually look like. The King in Black storyline is the most cosmically ambitious thing Marvel has ever published, and the breadcrumbs in the Sony-Marvel agreement reportedly leave the door open for exactly that arc. If you want to be there for that breakdown, you already know what to do.